Kia ora, everybody. I'm just going to open our web hui with karakia. So, me karakia tātou. Manawa mai te Māori nuku, manawa mai te Māori rangi, kia mahara ki te whakaro, kia mahara ki te aroha, kia mātou, kia pakari, kia aroha tētahi ki te kahi, he oranga wairua, he oranga henengaro, he oranga tinana, he oranga whānau, kia Māori tū, kia Māori ora, haumi e, hui e, kai ki e. Well, welcome everybody. Kia ora koutou, ko Shaun Robinson tōku ingoa. I am the Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation, and we are really proud to be bringing you this Pink Shirt Day workplace webinar. And over 1,000 people registered, so you're part of a big community that's participating this morning. I'd just like to say, as we go through our speakers and the presentation, feel free to put questions. We are using Slido for questions, so that's S-L-I-D-O. And if you go to slido.com and put in the code 4227602, that's 4227602. Then your questions will come through, and we'll come to those at the end of the seminar. So, it's my real pleasure to introduce our speakers today. I'm pretty excited actually, because I think I'm going to learn a lot in this webinar. So to start with, I'd like to introduce Bevan Catley, and Dr. Bevan Catley is a Professor of Work and Organisation in the School of Management at Massey University. Bevan's research has focused on workplace bullying and psychological risks, and he's published extensively on these topics. And beyond Massey, Bevan has served on boards in Australia and New Zealand, at the Academy of Management and International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment, and is the co-founder of Healthy Work Group, a multidisciplinary team of researchers interested in the psychological factors in workplaces and health safety. So thank you, Bevan, for joining us. Looking forward to your presentation. Then also Dr. Kelly Feng, who is a colleague and a friend of mine, who is the Chief Executive of Asian Family Services, which is an organisation that provides a range of health and wellbeing services for the Asian communities in New Zealand. So after qualifying as a medical doctor in China, Kelly migrated to New Zealand in 2002 and has made significant contributions to health and mental health and wellbeing sectors and the social sector for her communities. And this work was recognised when she was recently made a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit. Also really want to welcome Mary Haddock-Staniland. Now, Mary is a diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging global executive and trans advocate, and is highly regarded in the corporate sector through leadership in social spheres, and is a committed advocate for diversity and inclusion and the rainbow community. And she's really well known for her kind of right on the mark, on the nose social commentary and the voice and insight she lends from the rainbow community perspective. Mary also whakapapas Māori, so brings that intersectional view into what she does. Also, Poutasi. Api is currently Director of Pacific Public Health at Te Whatu Order, and was previously head of health at WorkSafe. Now, Api is passionate about improving the outcomes for Pacific communities across Aotearoa. He's Samoan by heritage, and his villages as Whakalee and Solo Solo in Western Samoa. Throughout his career, Api has strived to embed and achieve equity for Pacific peoples and worked in a range of roles across public health, health policy, and prevention. Now, I just need to say that this webinar is being recorded and will be saved to our YouTube channel so others can actually see it and get the goodies from it going forward. So look, a really exciting lineup of people that we're going to hear from this morning. But before we do, really need to talk a little bit about what is Pink Shirt Day, where it came from, and what is the bullying elimination kaupapa all about. The cool thing about Pink Shirt Day is that it started in the community and it continues in the community. In 2007 in Canada, in a school, two students saw that another student was being bullied for being gay and for wearing pink, and so they organised for some of their friends to come to school wearing pink as a show of allyship and solidarity, and they were amazed. Word got around and hundreds of students turned up, some of them dressed head to foot in pink, and really a sort of global social movement was born from that event. So the Mental Health Foundation has got behind Pink Shirt Day in Aotearoa, and it's been celebrated here since 2009 and just goes from strength to strength, gets bigger and bigger every year. So it's really about creating communities where bullying can't thrive, where people feel safe, where they feel celebrated, where they feel valued and respected for who they are, regardless of gender identity, sexual orientation, age, ability, religion, cultural background. We're a very diverse Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we need to celebrate that, and people need to feel that they belong and that they're safe. So, why is it important? Unfortunately, bullying is a big issue in New Zealand, and particularly in workplaces as well as schools and communities. Studies show that 1 in 5 New Zealand workers feels they were discriminated against, harassed or bullied, and the rainbow community employees face far higher rates of bullying, as do Māori, Pacifica, those from non-European ethnic backgrounds, Asian communities, people with disabilities. The reason why the Mental Health Foundation is involved, apart from this just being the right kaupapa and the right thing to do, is that bullying affects people's mental health. Being the person who's being bullied can have profound impacts on a person's mental health, long-lasting and very significant. And being a bystander, seeing bullying happening affects people's mental health and well-being, and being a bully actually affects people's mental health and well-being. So mental health, well-being is totally bound up in the issue, the kaupapa of bullying, and bullying is totally bound up in the kaupapa of well-being. So how do you recognise and respond to workplace bullying? I'm sure that our panel will be able to sort of elaborate on this. But it's sometimes hard to recognise bullying, and because it can be quite subtle. Sometimes it is direct, aggressive behaviour and put downs of people on the basis of some aspect of who they are. Sometimes it is a sense of excluding people, either by not giving them opportunities, not including them in the kind of the sense of belonging in a workplace, or not giving them appropriate sort of work and opportunities. Sometimes it is overloading people and not giving them the resources they need. Sometimes it is very poor communication that leads to manipulation and aggressive ways of trying to resolve either difficult situations or control people in the workplace. It's not one-off occasions where someone might make a thoughtless comment or slip up and do something offensive. It is about repeated activity that causes harm, whether people are conscious of that activity or not. So we need to respond to bullying when it happens, and it's a responsibility of everybody, not just the HR department or managers. One of the ways I often talk about bullying is that, in terms of the different roles in bullying, of being bullied, I've been bullied. Being a bystander, standing by, seeing it happen and not doing anything, that's been me. Being an upstander, yes, I have been an upstander, and hopefully I'm more of an upstander the older and uglier and more confident I get. And I've also been a bully. I have to stick my hand up and say at different times in my life, both my childhood and my adult life, I've been a bully, sometimes very consciously, sometimes unconsciously. So for me, it's not about saying, there's these baddies over there and we must sort of address them. It is about a change in culture, and it is about us all doing better and working to continuously do better together. So without further ado from me, I'd really like to invite Bevan now to speak. Bevan, why is bullying such a workplace health and safety concern? And can you talk about how organisational factors can increase the likelihood of workplace bullying and conversely decrease it?
Sure. Kia ora, Shaun, and kia ora tātou katoa. So why should we worry about workplace bullying? So there's robust and compelling evidence that bullying is a significant problem. It impacts real people. There are real human and economic costs associated with bullying. So bullying, workplace bullying, it's a hazard that can, should, and must be managed. So how pervasive is workplace bullying? So if we have a look in the next slide there, there's a substantial body of academic research along with data from Stats New Zealand and WorkSafe and others that indicate that bullying is experienced by a significant number of people in the workforce. Last year's human rights survey, which is down the bottom there, further substantiates that view. And if we look at the sort of reported prevalence rates, particularly those that use internationally validated and comparable measures, you get rates between about 11.4 and almost 40% by sector, and about 13 to about 20% in general samples. Cyberbullying is reported at around about 3 to 5%. Now, these rates, may be higher than that's reported internationally, but it really does depend on which sample populations are being compared. If we start to look at sectors, so hospitality, education, retail, and then within healthcare, nursing, surgery, intensive care, social work, medical training generally are some of the hotspots for workplace bullying. Complaints of bullying are also quite a common feature in grievances that are heard before the ERA and the Employment Court. So what impact does all this bullying have? So if we have a look at the next slide there, again, there's lots of evidence, both locally and internationally, that paints a pretty grim picture. So the harm linked to workplace bullying can be considered according to the impact on the target, on witnesses, and also the organisation. So academics that have done surveys and interviews report that targets of bullying experience a range of negative health impacts relating to their psychological and physical well-being, and you can see those there in that slide. and they experience these far more than those who do not experience any bullying. What's also really important is that individuals who witness bullying also report many of those same negative impacts. So what this means is that the damage associated with bullying is not simply confined to the person experiencing it. Rather, bullying, or workplace bullying, produces these sort of toxic ripples that also harm others in the vicinity. And those toxic ripples of workplace bullying extend to direct and indirect impacts on the organisation. And we can have a look at these in the next slide. And so it's not surprisingly that those negative individual impacts that we saw a second ago flow through to feelings and perceptions about motivation, engagement, support, job performance, and productivity. And of course, one way that people cope with bullying is they don't come to work, or they simply leave, and that only adds further costs. Then there are all the additional costs associated with, having to manage complaints and any legal proceedings. Then there is also the potential for substantial, but quite difficult to measure, damage to the organisation's reputation. And we saw that in the media on quite a few occasions over the last couple of years. So what are the red flags that we need to look for? So if we have a look at the next one. Again, in New Zealand and in international research, it's strongly implicated a poorly organised and managed work environment in the development of workplace bullying. So this focus on the work environment in the development of bullying is theorised, what we term in academic circles as the work environment hypothesis. And what this means is that, in essence, the stress and the frustration that flows from both the content and context of work, coupled with management inaction or tolerance towards bullying, can lead to people being bullied. If we look at specific factors, the quality of workplace relationships appears key. So targets are more likely to report poor or indifferent relationships with supervisors and colleagues, lower levels of support and higher levels of laissez-faire leadership than those who don't experience bullying. So this absence of support contributes to a culture that's indicative of that lack of cohesion, lack of inclusion, or just a culture that just simply tolerates bullying as a workplace behaviour. You also have a work environment that's characterised by unreasonable workloads and job demands. So, pressure to work more hours, alongside difficulties in accessing flexible working hours that result from, those time and workload demands. Those things really strongly predict bullying and other forms of ill treatment. Then there are also those broader contextual factors. So workers who perceive they had lower job security, they report higher rates of ill treatment compared to those who perceive much stronger job security. Workers who perceive themselves as either being overskilled or underskilled for their job also report higher rates of ill treatment. Things like lower occupational status, limited career options, and limited job mobility are also have been identified as risk factors. Witnesses to bullying also report a poorer work environment compared to non-witnesses. And this indicates it's not just simply, targets perceptions of the work environment. So how can we prevent and manage workplace bullying? So if we have a look at the next one. So internationally and locally, there have been lots of specific measures that have been put forward as being effective in preventing and intervening in bullying. Unfortunately, though, there hasn't been that much work done trying to actually provide evidence of their effectiveness. So that evidence base around what is effective is unfortunately a bit thin. But in terms of specific measures, what we do know is that if you just rely on individuals to cope with bullying, or simply just leave, taking steps to try and enhance their coping strategies, that's likely to be ineffective. Measures that foster social support, in particular, also supervisor and organisational support are likely to be effective. And in our Workplace Barometer project, based on that work, we identified what we've termed these 4 pillars of healthy work. So we think these pillars are really important because if we focus on either one, some, or all of those pillars, you're likely to see some benefit in terms of both enhancements to individual and organisational wellbeing and performance. So just quickly, the concept of psychosocial safety climate, PSC, so that focuses on the extent to which organisational leaders genuinely and sincerely care about workers' psychological health and safety. And in a workplace that's characterised with having strong PSC, they have policies and procedures and practices to safeguard mental health, and well-designed jobs that are designed to minimise psychosocial hazards like bullying. Justice equates to perceptions of being treated fairly across all areas of the organisation. Inclusion refers to having voice in the decisions that affect your work and having access to information which affects your job, along with having resources to get the job done. So widespread perceptions of fairness and inclusion, provide that groundwork for a supportive culture. Also, in terms of management competencies, so our colleagues identified a framework of about 10 competencies, and these are built around things like respect and being respectful and being responsible, communicating current and future work demands, managing themselves and others, and also having the confidence to manage difficult situations. And so what we found is that these competencies will not only help managers deal with bullying and other forms of ill treatment, but they also contribute to that development of a productive and healthy work environment. So just finally, what can others do if a bullying situation appears to be developing? Well, again, unfortunately, there's little research in examining the role of bystander behaviour in workplace bullying, but I think it's reasonable to conclude that bystander behaviour can either influence the bullying process negatively and or positively. So if ignoring the behaviour is clearly likely to be interpreted by the target as empowering the bullying, as is tacit or explicit support. So upstandard behaviour, like the 5 behaviours that have been promoted here, so we consider that a form of bystander behaviour, and that is likely to have a positive impact. So demonstrating support for the target or confronting the bully, that's likely to have some be beneficial in at least a couple of ways. So firstly, by reducing the number and severity of instances and stopping those instances from being repeated, and secondly, preventing that pattern of bullying behaviour from being established. So the destructive force of bullying comes from its repetition. So breaking that is going to help to reduce the harm. And of course, this needs to be done in a manner that's both safe and doesn't escalate the situation. So alongside awareness and training, the other key is to enhance bystanders' self-efficacy, their confidence to step in, to do the right thing and to do it early. So in terms of a quick summation for me, the way we get on top of workplace bullying, we have well-designed work, takes place in a fair and inclusive workplace with supportive colleagues, led by competent and compassionate managers. Thanks, ngā mihi nui.
Thanks so much, Bevan. That was really, really succinct and really meaty and very useful. Mary, I'd like to come to you next, and really looking forward to hearing you talk about the whole notion of diversity and inclusion in the workforce and the role that plays in preventing bullying and creating a positive workplace experience, particularly from the perspective of the LGBTQIA+ community and from kaumaki Māori and all the intersections that occur there. So looking forward to hearing from you, Mary.
Well, first of all, kia ora koutou katoa, karanga mai mihi mai ko Mary Haddock-Staniland tuku ingoa. Lovely to be here. Thank you, Shaun, so much for the invitation to join you and the rest of the crew here as a panelist. And ngā mihi nui to the Mental Health Foundation, actually, for always leading the way with this kaupapa every year. I love it, and was actually honoured when I was asked to be involved, because I've never been asked to be involved in this before. So, you know, there's a first time for everything. Look, love your question, and I'm not as fancy as Bevan. Bevan and I know each other, and he knows this, but not many people listening or watching this will probably know that. But I don't have a doctorate at a university, and so I don't have any fancy slides. Sorry, you've just got me to talk. But look, it's a great question, and in my honest opinion, probably going back on the whole kaupapa, really, which is completely inappropriate for me to say on a live YouTube call or Zoom call, but just, you know, don't be an a-hole is probably the best summary of what the purpose of this entire day is about. And in my honest, personal and professional opinion, I work for an American company and all my bosses are asleep, so no one's even hearing me say this. But in my opinion, diversity and inclusion play a crucial role in creating a psychologically safe workplace where people feel comfortable to be themselves. And I know this, all folks will know this, that by creating an environment where everyone is welcomed, where everyone is respected, where everyone is valued for who they are, organizations can foster a culture of true openness, of true trust and support that encourages individuals to really express who they are. And I think in addition to promoting positive mental health outcomes, embracing diversity and inclusion can also lead to better business outcomes. And we know through studies that have shown organizations with diverse teams are more innovative, they are more adaptable, and they're better equipped to solve complex problems. So, you know, in the how, I mean, goodness, if it was that easy, we'd all be doing it, right? But it's not. I think one of the approaches is to prioritize this mahi, prioritize diversity and inclusion in hiring processes, by actively seeking out candidates from underrepresented groups. Let's start there. That's not brain science, and it's actually free to do. So for anyone that comes to me or talks to my team about me coming to speak at things about, my gosh, it's so expensive to consider DEI. No, hun, it's actually not. Another way organizations can do better is unconscious bias or navigating bias training to help employees truly identify and challenge their own biases and assumptions. This is quintessential. I also think it's important to create policies and processes and procedures that promote inclusion and respect of all employees. And that can probably start with accommodating folks from dimensions such as disability and accessibility. We give a lot of love to other dimensions, but of the many government buildings that exist, for example, in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, not many folks would be aware of the fact that there are 14 buildings in Wellington that if you are visually impaired or are in a wheelchair, you're probably not going to have much luck getting into those buildings. I think also workplaces can create opportunities for employees to share. You know, when we bring to the table our diverse backgrounds and experiences and we share that lived experience, it's vital. People relate to that. I mean, for me, for example, I'm often talking at the opening of an envelope inside my organization, and I share very openly that from a young age, I knew I was different. I never played sports like my brothers or my twin brother. I loved Barbie dolls. I probably still love Barbie dolls, actually. I'd love to look like one day. I loved pen and papers. I loved playing with kids who were either physically challenged or who probably also struggled to make connections in the world like I did. I mean, we were always considered the odd ones out. I grew up in a very small part of New Zealand. And school, truly for me, it was a nightmare. I don't remember a day of my entire schooling where I wasn't bullied. I mean, kids were absolutely awful. And I learned from a very young age to get a tough skin. And in my late teens and in my 20s, I was doing a lot of processing, trying to figure out myself and the world and where I fitted in. And there were plenty of highs and a few lows. Some of them have been documented around the place. But I think that thick skin at school from being bullied and that absolute refusal to accept the possibility of failure gave me the strength to bounce back. And those things and that support from small groups of people and influential characters that I had in my life back then really helped me. And I think that that's important these days. I feel, nowadays I'm probably a little bit more confident and feel like I've earned my place to kind of be here and own the kaupapa and conversation about this as a cog in a very big engine. But I believe that, the momentum of history is on our side. I think the world, at least the modern and Western world, is changing for the better, and it needs a bit of a push to get there quicker. But if we give space and a sense of belonging to minority groups, it doesn't mean there's less space or less validity for everyone else. We aren't slicing up a bloody pie here. We're trying to make a bigger one that everyone wants to eat. And one of my favorite C words that I share in the boardroom, and for any of my friends on this call right now worried about what I'm going to say, it's curiosity. I think if we dial up curiosity and dial down defensiveness, we will get better outcomes. Doing diversity and inclusion means we're all going to do well, but doing that well means we're all going to do well because of it. And that the centered excellence or intelligence around DEI, the calculus of that is a genuine win-win proposition. An organization that's not doing this work or educating its people, you soon learn who they are. And when you're confronted with that, you're often stopped in your own tracks. I think it's also important to point out that inclusion is not complex. Human beings are. And like any new discipline, we have to think differently and act differently. If we think about into the second part of your question, Shaun, if I remember it rightly, correct me if I'm wrong, about advocacy in the trans community, particularly for the fact that I whakapapa te Māoridom. And while I have there is some gaps between how I connect with Māoridom due to some of my upbringing, I think it's important to understand that Māori and rainbow employees often face very unique challenges in the workplace. And that's, I think, down to discrimination. I think it's down to also marginalization. And I think employers need to create a culture of inclusivity and respect that celebrates diversity, sure, but how to achieve that, in my mind, is that this has to be prioritized. It has to be prioritized through education and awareness about Māori culture, first and foremost, but also around the issues that our rainbow whānau are confronted with. Now, I know I sit here in a position of, as a woman of color who's trans and leading global work in a publicly listed American company. I know that brings a lot of weight with me because the world thinks I've got it easy. I think everyone's journey is their own. And I think if you provide back-end information, cultural competency training to everyone, not just to pockets of the business, that helps create safer spaces for Māori and rainbow employees. And I think that, again, I tap back to the sharing of experiences and perspectives without fear of judgment. I think another important step, again, is through policy and process. You can never review those documents enough. And I think cultural appropriation through resources and support is incredibly important. I work a lot out in the globe. And while in America, I mean, don't even get me started on what's wrong in America, they're very similar to us in the sense that there's a lot of people standing in the desert waiting for someone to fire off the shots. If we fight fires with fires, what happens? It only gets bigger. And I think employers should be proactive in addressing the significant discriminations and harassment against Māori and rainbow employees. I think saying all of that, I'm openly bold and unapologetic about my perspectives. And I say this a lot with my American colleagues, too much hooey and not enough doey. And I would hope everyone here knows what that means. There's a lot of meetings and we talk a lot about the same things. I feel like I've been talking on this talk track for the last 15 years. My goodness, can we just get shit done? And I think it's important to jump on board and help create change. And I think that is something that we all have a responsibility to do.
Kia ora, Mary. Thank you so much for that. That's yeah, right on the money. And very inspiring. Yeah, let's get shit done.
Let's get shit done. You can say the shit word, Shaun. It's okay. I know you're the boss, but no one's going to fire you. I mean, it's true. Let's get it done. I think there's so much you can get complicated and get caught up, and it's all too hard. We've got lots of unlearning and lots of relearning we all need to do. I think let's be human-centered about it and get it done.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, look, thank you, Mary. Just want to bring in Kelly now. So. Yeah, Kelly, you know, that whole issue of diversity, inclusion, celebration of a difference, of cultural difference, many of those themes that both Bevan and Mary raised are highly relevant to your work. So can you just bring us through some of your insights from the work you've done on behalf of different Asian communities?
Thank you, Shaun. Can you hear me okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Just sharing my yeah, thank you for the invitation. Really honored to be here. It's my first one as well, Pink T-shirt Day. But we've been doing a lot of work with the Mental Health Foundation. So I'll be sharing some of the Asian. I think a lot of times like people are thinking, oh, who are the Asians? Are they just Chinese? No, actually we've been quite diverse and lumped some together as a one category. So I'll be sharing what we've been doing and some of the things that I highlighted, particularly apply for some of the Asian population in New Zealand as well. And yeah, happy to Q&A at the end as well. So AFS, Asian Family Services, we been here quite a long time. A lot of you probably didn't know we existed, but we established in 2019. Sorry, can you still see my screen? Or just like share? It just moved from my screen. Can you still see it, Shaun?
No, you were sharing your wallpaper, not your slides, Kelly. But look,
okay.
What you say is the most important thing. So
okay. So is it stopped sharing?
It has stopped sharing, yeah.
Okay, so that's all right. I'll just talk to the PowerPoint. It didn't quite work. But anyway, so we start in 1998, nationwide provider. One of the things that we really proud is we run the nationwide Asian helpline, and that's again quite diverse. We cover Mandarin, Cantonese, Thai, Vietnamese, Korean, Hindi, and English. So we providing that service since 1998. And that's kind of leads to other service providers that we've been creating. And one of the exciting ones I really love to share today is my Asian Wellbeing Services that are creating a culturally linguistic diverse kind of an EAP service. And we're talking about workplace play and all that. But we actually, in New Zealand, we have a very dominant, I guess, providers that are focused on mainstream. I have to say that, but that's just true. And we are becoming ever diverse in New Zealand in terms of population, demographic changing. Even in Auckland, I think you probably noticed 30% of population identify themselves as Asian. And plus, you could imagine the workplace will be very diverse as well. The services that are available are not quite culturally competent yet. I think that's all other speakers will point it out. We got to change some of the way that we've been doing things in New Zealand because a lot of times we just haven't got time, or it's too hard basket and we're just not doing it. I think I'm calling for the action that leaders need to relook at what are your workforce, and if they are diverse, are you supporting them enough with that culture lens and cultural competency from in terms of EAP services, in terms of building everyone's cultural competency within your organization or the stakeholders as well. So yeah, that's one of the services I really want to share. And we do a lot of workshops that are helping people and teams that are understanding those diverse, working environment and how people can understand each other better and to gel. And like the other speaker was saying, you have a better team culture and productivity. Of course, your business will be growing. Instead of if you have a toxic culture, then again, we Asians sometimes are really lack of understanding of where to seek help, and mental health. We know there's a huge stigma and shame. And that shows in the research, 44.4% of Asian experiencing some of depression, anxiety over the last 3 years over COVID. And in that research, it also pointed out over the COVID time, we had really rapidly increasing phone calls regarding, people being called Chinese virus, and there's just bullies at schools and everywhere. So it's quite traumatized, I would say. So a lot of times people are put their heads down and not really know where to seek help, and how comfortable they are calling those 0800 numbers, and they know they wouldn't understand them because they are only, speaking English and in the framework of pretty much Pakeha. So that's something I really want to point out. But in terms of Asian, in New Zealand are made up of 34 ethnic groups, very diverse. So from East Asian, Middle Asian to the South Asian, Indian, Sri Lanka. So that's all lumped sum together. And not to say that breakdown within Asian population, that we also have a diverse like rainbow community, disabled people in New Zealand that are kind of a further marginalized. So that's kind of a need to be really considered as well. Asian population, why Asian population? I guess is kind of talking about future projection that we will become a second largest population by 2040, roughly. And that's kind of not me saying it, it's the stats New Zealand are saying it. And so we pretty much cannot be, avoided, I guess, for the good of embracing diversity, like, Mary was saying, that we really truly need to think about what are actually we're doing, each organization, each, business, each community. And we have this recent, heartbroken report from Education Review Office. I was in my tears when I was in the launch in Wellington, together with the CEOs and the Ministry of Ethnic Communities, a bunch of people in the room, because I have 3 children born in New Zealand, and they, by listening that report, like 40% of students with color and different ethnic people and background are being bullied at school, and 50% of teachers feel uncomfortable or don't think they have the cultural competency to work cross-culturally with those students and their parents. And that's, to me, is such a worry. And that we know our young people in this country are not doing so well for their mental well-being. And we have the worst suicide rates, and all that is indicating we have to action today, not to wait any longer. And we have been doing some of the work partnership with Mental Health Foundation in regarding Pink T-shirt Day to really raise the awareness, not only kind of just wearing a pink T-shirt day, but also start those, conversations about what does that mean to you and what can you do when things happen at school, at workplaces. And we do that in different language as well. We have been translating in different major, Asian language, and we have been using our own kind of Asian social medias. And that's one of the things I want to pinpoint out as well. You probably hear from me from some other channels that I'm saying, like, although, sometimes, by all means that are great that people are translating informations, but if you still put those ones in your English website, for example, how can you think that people do not speak in good English can find those informations, right? So we're talking about, the amazing work that Mental Health Foundation, Shaun has been, supporting, is really working with organizations that are knowing their community and write in the ways that those people can understand, relate to their stories, not simply translate those stories do not relate to them, and using the channels that are channel out that are truly reaching to them as well. There's no one size fits all, like, the campaigns that are run in the mainstream wouldn't really reach those population. So I'm really looking forward, continue this Mahe and partnership to continue to challenge the status quo and to make work, New Zealand future a better place for all people, regardless of ethnicity and diverse. Thank you, Shaun.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you very much. So Api, moving to you. So with your experience from WorkSafe and your long experience working with Pacific Health, what perspectives can you bring about the role of mental well-being in the workplace and how this can really support flourishing Pacific aiga?
Thanks, Shaun. Whatu, everyone. Malo lava le sui fua, malo rangi mama. Talofa, Api Poutasi. Thank you for the invitation to speak to everyone on Pink Shirt Day. Just wanted to say first and foremost, really good cause in terms of being an upstander. And if you are experiencing or know of others who are experiencing bullying, please speak up to your colleagues, to your friends, to your networks, and even to your managers as well, because it is a really important cause to get behind. Firstly, just wanted to talk with some of the other presenters in terms of their conversations. If you start with diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can't go wrong, because it actually promotes and provides a safe space to talanoa to get together and to provide mentally healthy workplaces for workplaces. In terms of
move a little bit closer to your mic.
In terms of understanding other people's different views and cultures, just to put up the FONOFALE model there, which is a holistic model in Pacific culture, which thinks about bringing our whole selves to work. So thinking about things like the po we've got there, which are physical, so your physical health, your spiritual, which includes your ainga, your family, your ancestors, where you come from, and then mental health as well alongside there. Other factors you've got there, which we've talked about, sexuality, gender, and socioeconomic status. So this is a way of thinking about when people go to work and come home from work, the multiple hats they have on, and it's really important that we embrace the whole worker as they become part of the workplace as well. And that includes, their family and their culture, which is a really important part of everything they do. So embracing that diversity in terms of the policies, the procedures that you see in some of your workplaces will actually make a huge difference in terms of the culture that's created in workplaces as well. So firstly, just wanted to touch on that in terms of when we're framing different approaches, it's really important to engage with different lenses when we're thinking about what that looks like at a workplace space, and then also think about that prevention aspect as well, as we don't want to see bullying. So what are we going to do in our environments to ensure that that doesn't happen to our people as well? Next slide, please. Great. Just quickly, it's a big model. This is the international standard around psychosocial harms. Firstly, just wanted to say there is a Health and Safety at Work Act, which says that workplaces need to look after people's physical health, but it also needs to look after their mental health as well. So there's a big role to play in terms of workplaces creating mentally healthy workplaces to ensure that individuals aren't harmed at the end of the day. And so to really kind of talk about this, there's kind of three key concepts in terms of this standard. And the one that I just wanted to, there's three of them. So the first one just wanted to point out there is work design. So we've heard Bevan and others talk about thinking about how work is designed to ensure that people are motivated in the jobs they do, the tasks they carry out, and making sure that they're engaged in it too. So having that talanoa from a cultural lens, having multiple groups engaged in talanoa from the get-go is really important in the way you design work. The second one there, which is kind of work environment. So that's kind of been touched on as well. If the environment's not safe, then other behaviours and things can tend to crop up from time to time. So thinking about how you create a work environment and thinking about what are the things that will make that environment more safe, more acceptable, to help people thrive as well. So thinking about that concept. And then the last one there, which I think is one of the most important, is social factors, which includes relationships. So from a Pacific perspective, relationships are vital in terms of how we engage and relate. Because from a Pacific perspective, we believe that we are all connected. We don't just stand in isolation, and we aren't just individuals, we're actually connected by families and our relationships. So understanding how our relationships and how we relate to one another in a work context is really important, and respecting those areas and the areas in between, and thinking about how we can support one another to improve mental health in the workplace. Next slide, please. And lastly, just wanted to touch upon again, thinking about how we start to create environments which are mentally healthy. It's really important because it helps support positive mental health for all. It helps eliminate or minimize the harms of people getting harmed, such as bullying, harassment, and other things. And then it builds up the strength and knowledge of others as well. And we know that there's a lot of evidence out there around the positive things that come off the back of creating environments where workers are supported and able to thrive, increased productivity, increased engagement and sort of job satisfaction. And at the end of the day, it's just good for people, because we know that for work, there is no work without the people. And it's really important that we engage, like we said, to support our people and engage, hear and listen to what they're doing. So that's it from me.
Thank you, RP. That's awesome. So first question that's come through is, how can managers support their staff to be up to standards, given that standing up requires the upstander to have courage and trust that they will be safe? So, yeah, I'm going to chuck that one maybe at Mary to start with. Any thoughts from you on that one? How can people be supported to be upstanders so that they feel safe?
Well, I think if you're a manager and you've had someone come to you, ensuring that they're heard and seen and validated is incredibly important. This isn't a cookie cutter approach. Obviously, every situation is different depending on what you're being confronted with. But I think it's incredibly important to listen and to observe. If there are people who, thank you. Is that message for me? I'm just trying to. Thank you. No, it's not for me. Okay. Yeah, I think there's so much human elements to this that you just would stop and use a lot of common sense to ensuring that folks are there is a clear understanding. And also, I think, if I remember the question correctly, being around, if you're standing up as a manager, what can the knock-on effect of that be when you're a manager needing support from other managers and peers, particularly if it's a large situation, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, I know from my own experience as being a manager that it can be really difficult to support people to feel safe enough to speak up. And it can be quite confusing as a manager to know when you can act if people are not providing, the sufficient information. One of the things I've learned is you act anyway. If people have spoken up, even if they're not prepared to make a formal complaint, you act anyway, because otherwise we get caught in this loop where nothing happens. Any thoughts from any of the other panel members? Bevan, was that
Yeah, I was just going to say, and that's where those competencies that I sort of briefly skipped over become so important. So, managers that are available, that are trustworthy, have got integrity and credibility in their workplace, that are confident and resilient to deal with those kinds of situations become really important. And they're also proactive and will take responsibility and ownership for the behaviour that's going on, along with those points that Mary was making about, listening and being compassionate and that. So, having those competencies, why you have them is so you can deploy them at exactly those kinds of moments.
Anybody else?
I think the policy is one thing. I mean, the managers, I guess they need to have a freedom or feel confident that they can get some kind of a culturally appropriate EAP outside, so they feel like they are heard and deal with some of the issues. They might get some emotional support outside, and it's pretty confidential. It's very important, critical as well, and to create that leadership, I guess, to be create that organization culture is pretty important.
Yep, and for me, agree with what everyone has said. I think having the policies and training in place beforehand as well is really important. And like we said, having leaders lead from the front, so talking about their own experiences actually opens the door and makes people feel more comfortable to share as well. But firstly, as Shaun said, I think it's ACT, because there's a lot of inaction where people can feel frustrated when it's happening as well.
Yeah, and I guess I'd throw in again too, I think that our legal processes in New Zealand are not very well attuned to actually being able to create positive cultures. They are very sort of conflict-based, evidence, counter-evidence, all of that kind of thing. The theme that I've heard a lot in these presentations and in answering this question is about competency, it's about training, it's about confidence, particularly amongst managers, but right through the organisation, and really leaning into that whole question about what do we do if staff are feeling excluded, bullied, discriminated against, and being really proactive about that in terms of developing our skills. Look, this has been a fantastic webinar. I wish there was time to go through more questions, but there isn't, unfortunately. So apologies to anyone who's put questions in the chat that haven't been answered. So I'd just like to close it up by thanking, Bevan, Kelly, Mary, and Api. I think everything has been just really, really awesome. I hope all of you out there have got something out of this and can take something back and put it into action. I'll get in trouble if I say it the way that Mary and I said it before. Do one thing. Do one thing differently as a result of today. If you can, do one thing more tomorrow. Just a call to action from us. We come to the Mental Health Foundation and look for our workplace bullying resources. The link, I think, will be there in the chat. And then a final sort of call to action. So, Pink Shirt Day and all the work that the Mental Health Foundation does around eliminating bullying is 100% funded out of the community. So if you want to help with that, go to https://pinkshirtdayrazorly.com donate. I think it's there in the chat, so I don't have to say it. So if you feel like dropping us a fiver or a tenner or a hundreder, drop us a Rutherford. We'd really appreciate it. We'll put it to really good use. But let me just close by saying, whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga ki a mā, kina ki uta ki a mā, taratara ki tae, he aki ana te atakera kura, e tio e hoka hei hauhu tihei Māori ora. And that is a call for new beginnings, new days, for moving us forward. So kia ora, thanks for everything, thanks for participating, and keep up that momentum towards eliminating bullying in workplaces in Aotearoa.